Yo, what is up, my Nakama? So my name is Daniel. I'm a current third-year medical student, and this is my first YouTube Q&A after 3 years of YouTube. I probably should have done it earlier, but I just never thought to do so. So now, in 2022, this is going to be it. So I asked some questions on YouTube and Instagram, and I got a total of 7 questions, which is a little bit little, but given my audience size, I guess that's about expected. But I'm going to try and answer all 7 of these questions in detail, and hopefully you get some good responses. All right, so before I get into the 7 questions, just a quick background. I'm in my 3rd year of medical school right now. I am currently on a leave of absence, which I started last July. So I finished 3 rotations. I finished internal medicine, psychiatry, and neurology, and then I started to take a leave of absence, and I'm restarting medical school this March, most likely with my surgery rotation, which I'm a little nervous for, but I'm definitely excited to restart. I'm 25 years old. I graduated from Johns Hopkins with a degree in chemistry back in 2018, and now I'm in my 3rd year of medical school. It's pretty much just a quick background, and really I'm just gonna get straight into these questions because that's kind of probably what you're here for. So the first question that I got was from Javi from TikTok. I'm actually gonna have a video released with him talking about medical school and mental health and stuff, so stay tuned from that video, and I'll also link some of his socials in the description. You should definitely follow him on TikTok and Instagram. He's awesome, and I love the message that he's sending to medical students and health professionals. But his question was, how do you edit those awesome videos? So before medical school, I was like a part-time videographer during my gap year, and even before then, I was really into editing. I remember our school, our university had like a digital media center, and I'd always rent out the video cameras from there and like practice shooting videos. I was really into like fitness edits and stuff. And then I would take that footage into Premiere Pro, which was the software that they had, and I could use it for free since it was on their computers. And I would just practice editing and using the software for a really long time. So that's how I got proficient in Premiere Pro. And those skills just basically transferred really easily to YouTube. With all the cool edits and transitions and stuff. It's something that I think kind of came a little bit naturally to me, actually, because I've always enjoyed like videography and cinematography. Those are things that I like really pay attention to when I watch movies. So to be able to express myself in that way was kind of natural for me. But actually I am trying to transition into more of an Apple ecosystem, and this right here is a MacBook Pro, and I'm trying to use Final Cut Pro because I've noticed a little bit of issues with Premiere, like with crashing and just not being able to really sync well with like the hardware of my PC. So I'm trying to transition to like an M1 system that can really use Final Cut to its max. Final Cut is definitely a little bit different than Premiere because of the magnetic timeline, but I'm not gonna get too much into detail on that. One thing I would say for people who are trying to edit like cool videos and stuff is that often I let music be my guide. So even sometimes before I start an edit, I usually think of a song that I want to use, and then I let that song guide my edit. This is probably in the later stages of editing and videography, but it's something to think about if you're trying to make like a cool cinematic sequence or something. The first thing I would probably recommend for people who are trying to learn cool video editing is just really learn the ins and outs of the software that you're using and get really good at like keyboard shortcuts and just knowing what tabs or what keys do what in your editing software. All right, moving on to the second question, which is, in comparison to college courses, how difficult is medical school? So this is a great question. I think it depends on what college courses or major we're talking about. Definitely for some of the science and math majors, like I was a chemistry major, a lot of the advanced courses I believe were a lot harder than medical school, like conceptually. For example, Calc 3 or physical chemistry, a lot of those topics were theoretical in nature, and I think that those were probably more complex than any medical school course I've taken. But the thing that makes medical school hard is just the sheer volume of information that you have to keep stored in your head. So it's kind of like the course itself might be more difficult conceptually, but it's nowhere near as much information as you're gonna get in your medical school course. A great example of that is like a biochem course in college might be like a full semester, and you really go into detail about the complexities of like the proteins that are being involved and the enzymatic reactions. But biochem in medical school for me was like 1 week long, where I had to basically know everything in 1 week, at least on a surface level, not too complex, but it was just a ton of information in a short period of time. So I think that's kind of the main differences between college courses and medical school classes. Okay, moving on to question 3 is, do you think aerospace medicine will grow in the next years? Yes, definitely. Especially as civilian spaceflight becomes more common, there will definitely be a need for aerospace medicine physicians who can take care of complications that arise with space travel. I was actually talking to a couple residents that are currently in aerospace medicine programs, and they basically believe the same exact thing. And they said that as more private industries emerge as well, they're definitely going to be looking to hire space medicine physicians. So I definitely think it's a really unique and awesome field that is definitely going to grow in the future. All right, the rest of the questions are on my phone here, so I'm just going to have my phone up to see them. So the 4th question here is, what are some must-have items you need for rotations? So some must-have items will definitely like a stethoscope, reflex hammer, well, reflex hammer mostly for neuro, but you can always show up with a reflex hammer and be kind of that cool kid. Maybe like a pen light. I think in terms of resources that you'll definitely need for every rotation, I like to have like a notepad that I can quickly write in notes as I'm walking, because it's kind of, you don't always have access to like a computer with you. So if there are changes with the patients that you're taking care of, or you want to write down something to look up later, it's good to have like a small notepad, especially as you're rounding. It's just a quick notepad that you can pull out of your white coat. But yeah, from what I remember, I think most rotations will actually tell you like what equipment or things that you actually need like on a day-to-day basis, because it does vary between rotations. Like for psych, I mean, I never used my stethoscope or pen light for psych. I basically just had my notebook with me at all times. So it depends on what rotation, but yeah, pretty much it. All right, question number 5 is a pretty deep question, but it's, what is the most disappointing / promising thing you see in humanity? Oh man. Okay, this is a deep question for sure. Let's start off with disappointing. I think in terms of the most disappointing thing I've seen, at least in these past couple years, is like, we actually read an article in medical school about how there isn't too much sense of like collectivism in the United States, or like a community-based mentality. Like a lot of us are really individualistic in our thoughts and decisions, and that was one of the reasons why this pandemic has continued for so long, because people just don't have an inherent sense that if you put on a mask, you're not only protecting yourself, but you're protecting your community members around you. And that sense of community is something that is not necessarily prevalent in a lot of communities in the United States. So I think that's something that's a little disappointing, at least in the US. It's not true for all countries, especially countries like South Korea, for example, that even before the pandemic, when you were sick, just out of courtesy, you would wear a mask, to prevent the spread of the cold or the flu. But that mentality, I think, is a little bit disappointing, at least here in the United States. Now, in terms of the most promising thing I see in humanity, well, things are, looking a little bleak, at least with our administration decisions and politics and global warming and stuff. But I think that there are a lot of new generation scientists and physicians who, I wouldn't use the term like woke, but I would say, because that kind of has like a little bit of connotations, but I would say there's definitely people who are more aware of like the conditions that we need to tackle as a society. And like these emerging politicians and scientists and people even in the medical field, I think are definitely going to be good for the future of medicine and science and just humanity in general. So that's something that I find promising. All right, moving on to the 6th question, and it is, do you have any pointers for foreign students who would like to enter space med / medical school? Well, I don't know if I'm the best resource to talk about foreign students going into like medical school, because I have no experience with that, and I'm actually a little bit unfamiliar with what the process is. Like, I know you probably have to take the MCAT and stuff. I think that, and I'm just going to be speaking subjectively here, but I know that it is pretty difficult for foreign students to attend US medical schools. Like they're probably evaluated at a little bit of a higher standard just because they're competing with US applicants. So probably the best thing that you can do is just find some unique way to make your application stand out. Like, because you're definitely going to need the scores, right? You're going to need the good grades and you're going to need a good MCAT score just to make yourself competitive in that way. But then you need to find some way to make yourself unique, whether it's how you approach medicine or some of your research or extracurricular experiences. Just find a way to make yourself stand out in that respect. And then to answer your follow-up question, which is how would a foreign student enter space medicine? So actually space medicine is offered in a lot of other institutions outside of the US. So even if you weren't able to get into a United States medical school, I, for example, with my space medicine interest group, like we've collaborated with medical schools all across the world, some in Australia, some in India. So the space med community, even if you're not able to join it in the United States, is still available all across the globe. So don't worry, like if you don't end up getting into United States medical school, you can still 100% get involved with space medicine no matter where you are. All right, now ending with the last question here, which is a pretty serious question, but I think it's worth talking about. And it's, have you ever had, for example, depressive thoughts or episodes? I'm assuming like in medical school. So I would say before medical school, for sure not. Like I've always been extremely positive, that Dattebayo mentality, always going at it 100%, happy, positive. And I was like that for most of medical school. And even during preclinical, I was like that because I was so used to that type of studying that it wasn't too hard to transition. I mean, it was a lot of information, but once I got into the groove and found efficient study habits, even the preclinical years were not so bad. But then when clinical years happened, when I started third year of medical school, it's definitely hard to balance studying and almost having a full-time job. Well, in some days it's more than a full-time job. It's like 12 hours a day. And then just doing anything else in your life, like exercise, cooking, just having a social life, hanging out with family members and stuff. And that was definitely hard to balance. And I'm not sure if I would describe it as a depressive episode or thoughts, because I never went to a clinician or anything, and now I'm feeling much better. But looking back at that point in time, it was definitely hard to balance, and I was definitely getting a little bit jaded, like towards my patients and towards medicine, and it was hard to show up each morning with that mentality. And I didn't admit it back then, but looking back, it was probably close to like a depressive thought for sure. And that's kind of something moving forward, like in 2022, I want to be more transparent about that on this channel and across all social medias. And yeah, that's pretty much my answer for that question. And kind of my goal also, like going back into medical school, is to recognize when I feel this way and then just take a break or talk about it with someone, because we're all, as medical students, going through this same experience. So I think sharing our feelings and emotions with our classmates or with a therapist can definitely be really good to handle these types of feelings, because it is pretty hard, especially during clinical rotations. Like I've heard it gets better during fourth year. I mean, residency I know is a beast, but I'm going in kind of more optimistic, and I'm going in for the sake of learning, because I think if I treat it with that mentality, like I'm here to learn, I'm here to receive this awesome experience, then I think things will go a little bit better, hopefully. But I'll keep you all updated through my journey through third year and the rest of medical school. That was pretty much the last question. So thanks for watching this whole video if you got to this last question. Stay strong and healthy, my Nakama, and I'll see you in the next one. Dattebayo.